before we preach here, if you at least do this, come on, let's just practice real quick. At least do this. They know you're kind of paying attention. If you got an amen or an oh yeah or a shecky who or something, let that out. Kind of helps me know we need to keep moving along in the deal that you get it. Because I don't want to get bogged down and feel like you're not getting it this morning. Nehemiah chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4, we're going to be verse 1 through 3. Then we're going to look at verses 10 and 14 and then wrap up in verses 16 through 23. So we're going to go through the book of Nehemiah this morning, or not the book, but the chapter of Nehemiah this morning. As you're finding your place, let me say how thankful I am for our team. Man, Pastor Tim brought an incredible word. Amen. Last week did an incredible job about what broken down walls represent. And so we're here talking about that. That's what the story of Nehemiah is really wrapped around. But what an incredible team that we have as a staff and all the volunteers that serve week in and week out that do an incredible job. I think of somebody in particular that just through this last season has shown just an extreme amount of faithfulness is Haley Budlong. Haley Budlong is back. She's back there in the sound booth. And you usually notice people in the sound booth until something goes wrong, but nothing's going wrong this morning. And we just want to say thanks to Haley. She's been doing all the photo booths, different things like that. Come on, give her a hand. They did a baby shower for our youth pastor's wife, Tabitha, yesterday. She did a photo shoot for that. They was up here decorating her and Megan and Morgan and April and Megan Palmer. Just a group of ladies get together and do what they do. Sometimes for guys, it's so different. We're like, let's just cook some food. We'll be good. For the ladies, they like to decorate, so it's a little bit different. But just thankful for just all the great people that make each Sunday happen. And I got to watch online as we were traveling. I got to go do my oldest brother's wedding. My oldest brother's wedding last Saturday. Got to show up and speak life into their marriage and love on them and see family I hadn't seen in a while. And then I got to preach for a lifelong friend. Or I say lifelong, he's now a lifelong friend. But a friend that when I first became a Christian, he got saved around the same time. He's got a church in Central Arkansas doing an incredible work. And I got to go into their church, bless their church, speak life into their people. It was an incredible, incredible Sunday. And then when I left there and we took vacation, I got to watch the service. And I was like, man, I was amen and Tim. I was like, dude, that's good preaching. That brother, even with that big old pretty tie on and everything, that's good stuff. He brought the fire. It was so good. And just gave an opportunity for us to come back this week and really build upon that. Let me tell you where we're at. The walls represented in Jerusalem, in Judah, represented a defeated people. In life, there are times that we face defeat and we can either live in that defeat and act like it's not there, but everybody else can see it. You ever see someone that's just walking like, maybe, yeah, the walls are down, but hey, I kind of like the wind blowing a little better. And trying to make everything beautiful out of a broken situation. And the thing about it is God doesn't desire for you to continue to live in a broken, beat down situation. He wants you to be able to rebuild where you're broken as He does it through the leadership of which He gives you. Is the walls are down in the city. This is really a big issue because now they're defenseless against the enemy. The enemy has an easy target upon the people in that community, and the ones that are there, it's amazing that when your walls are torn down and you don't do anything to rebuild it, that kind of mentality can become something that you constantly live in. You think it's what you deserve because of decisions that you've made or things that have been done to you. But don't forget that these walls represent a defeated people, and Jesus doesn't desire for us to live a defeated life. He desires for us to live a redeemed life. And the difference between that is that when we're redeemed doesn't mean that we're perfect. It means that we are on a path because we've been justified to live in relationship with Him, that we are in a path to Him working out in our lives, speaking to us by the leading of the Holy Spirit, that we have an opportunity to watch Him rebuild the broken things that the enemy tried to keep us bound in. Because the two-sided coin of the enemy is shame and victimization. He wants to keep you ashamed that your walls are torn down. He wants to make you a victim because of what the enemy's done. Well, if I'd have had to do, you know what, if I was like this other city, if we'd have had the warriors that Persia had, it's amazing that as a victim, you start pointing the finger out. But as a victor, is when Jesus does something in your life, you don't blame the responsibility with anyone else. You say, this is my burden, my city, my walls, let's rebuild it. You don't start looking towards somebody else. You start owning where and what has happened. So these walls represent defeated people. And Nehemiah hears the report, and he is broken because he was under he had interpreted under Ezra's. And in the book of Ezra, Ezra had began to rebuild the walls, but the enemy easily tore them down. So he's thinking the walls have been rebuilt. And when he hears the report that they are burned down and they're like just trash, gathered in piles, the people are still very vulnerable as they're returning home from the exile. They've been in for 140 years. This is an extremely disheartening thing for Nehemiah. But you got to understand something too. So when we catch up to where we're at this morning, is Nehemiah's living with some favor in his life because he's a cupbearer for the king. And a cupbearer for the king is a noble position, but it's also an expendable position, because what that means is he's drinking the drink of the king's cup first so that the king doesn't become poisoned by some kind of a mutiny or an act of death upon him. He's drinking it, which means if he drinks it, he dies. The king goes, up, ain't drinking that. Give me the next one. He brings up another. It's an expendable position, but it's a noble position. But it's also a place that gave Nehemiah opportunity to be able to walk into what God had for him to do and the burden that he would receive. So not to bore you, but I just kind of got to build up to this point for us to understand that Nehemiah, here's what has happened, and he weeps. He's broken for the situation that's happening. He is burdened. And this burden is different than something that happens when you just kind of feel sorry about a situation. There's a ton of junk that I see that I feel bad about. But there's stuff that I see that I can't sleep. I can't eat right. I become so burdened that it kind of just, I can't be distracted away from it. I just stay so focused on it because I know it's something that God placed in me. And here's what I believe, is that those burdens are what God gives his people so that we don't become frustrated with where we are in life, because we're driven to a purpose that's bigger than what we see. That we're driven to a purpose to rebuild something. To know that God didn't rebuild us so we would just become selfish. He is rebuilding and restoring us so we would do the same with the opportunities that he's given us. This burden that Nehemiah has, this favor, is now burdened to go and to build this wall. He weeps, he prays, God, what should I do? And he responds and he acts righteously, and he says to the king, I've got to go build this wall. He didn't say, well, I'm thinking about going home and maybe starting a landscaping business, and it may be good for me to get into concrete or something. King, I'm just thinking. I'm not saying that's what I wanted. He said, well, what is it? He said, I want to rebuild the wall. And this king, Persia was not a friend of Israel anyway, gives him the opportunity to go and to rebuild. Can I tell you, there will be things you learn whenever you've been broken in the enemy's camp that will prepare you for what God is going to do. Why? Because all of these things, when the Apostle Paul says all of these things work together for the good of those that love him and live according to his purpose, he found favor in the enemy's kingdom to be able to get him protection, to be able to go back home, but also materials. Because what if he just shows up and he says, man, I got a vision to build this wall. But as he steps outside of the city of where he's at under the king, and he gets killed in the process of traveling, but he goes with the seal of the king and he's protected. But he also did his homework, because now he's got the governor of the forest who gives him trees and supplies, gives him things to build the wall with. I mean, it's one thing to show up and say, we're going to build the wall. How? I don't know, but we're going to do it. It's our big God. He's just going to boom, there's wood, and there's the brick, and there's No, he got to receive the supplies, because when God gives you a burden, you don't just, when you leap out, you also do your homework. You make a plan. And this is what he's done. He's making the plan. He's gained favor from the king. He's got protection and supplies, and he inspires the hearts of the people to come and to join him in the cause. Everything's going good. Everything's going good. It's just like whenever God intervenes in a situation in our lives. Can I tell you that whenever I came to Jesus Christ, the first moment, I left out of there feeling like $1 million. I was glowing. I felt free. Like the old saying that 10,000 pounds was lifted off of me. That's how I felt. And in the beginning, it seemed like everything was going well. But then it became this time where everybody wasn't as excited for me as I thought they should have been. And this is what you see in the book of Nehemiah. He's back in the city, doing what God's called him to do with the people that God has brought to him to do it with. And here's what happens in chapter 4. It says, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. Now, I thought incense was an odor. I had to look it up. So I was like, he became greatly smelly. He just stunk real bad. What was it? It means angry, visibly angry. And so he becomes very moved emotionally. And he ridiculed the Jews. And in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are these feeble Jews doing? What does he say? He said, what are these weak people doing? Will they restore their wall? He's questioning, saying they're so weak they're not going to be able to. So he's posing it as a question, though he's making a statement. What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? And will they offer sacrifices? The same God that put them in exile, they're going to offer a sacrifice and everything's going to be okay? He's ridiculing them. He said, will they finish in a day? Maybe they're all hyped up for the moment because they think it's going to be easy. They ain't going to finish in a day, and once it becomes hard, they'll quit because they're quitters. That's what they do. They're prisoners. He said, can they bring their stones back to life from the heaps of rubble, burned as they are? These burned out, defeated victims will not be able to do this job. And Tobiah, the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what they are building, even if a fox climbed up on it, he would break down their wall of stones. Do you only understand something? Stupid people have helpers when it comes to being a critic. They always got somebody who'll jump. Yeah, that's right. Whatever they're building this week, even a fox would jump on it. Now, fox looks like a little sweet animal. I've heard they can be angry. I've never really gotten close to one, never been bit by one, so I can't speak from experience, but I guess they're a dog with teeth. They could eat something, surely. A fox is not a great big beast. It's not like a lion. It's not like an elephant. It's not something. If you jump up on a wall and the bricks fall over, he's saying they're so weak they're not going to be able to do anything. This is the opposition that they face. See, Nehemiah, who has been experiencing favor up to this point, said he was going to rebuild the walls in 52 days, understands that in this process, there becomes the first stage of opposition, and it becomes from a distraction and a discouragement of what these people are saying. Can I tell you that whenever you start getting somewhere and you start feeling like you can do this, there's going to come a moment when opposition becomes obvious. See, Sanballat and Tobiah were enemies of the Jewish people. Why? Because they wanted them to stay weak and dependent upon a kingdom that was not God's. They would rather them stay weak and beaten down so they would never gain independence and the confidence that only God can give. You will find that there will be people in our lives that will be there. And I hope this isn't too heavy this morning, but I just feel in my heart this is what we have to kind of walk into, because we have all of these moments where we know God can give a burden. We're going to build a city. It's going to be great. It's going to be. But then when we face opposition, we're like, man, you mean it's hard? It's supposed to be hard. So we shouldn't act surprised when opposition comes. And Nehemiah is such a great map, a great blueprint of how we handle this, because these people are trying to distract and trying to discredit what they're doing. They're saying this, they wanted them to be kind of defeated in their mentality. They wanted them to stay beaten down. Can I tell you that to the enemy you're a threat whenever God begins to use you, and he would rather beat you down before you become at your greatest point, so that way you will never have the influence that he's called you to have. See, up to this moment, Nehemiah's got some influence. He's having some success. But now when opposition presents itself, I want you to see what it begins to do in the minds of the people. Can I tell you that this is what happens when you're doing God's work? Opposition is inevitable. Now, we think God's work is we think that it's doing ministry, like preaching from a microphone. No, God's work means that when you that God's work means it's made for Mondays, y'all. It means that the work that Jesus does in your life is for your business. It's for the place you work. It's for your family. It's for the school that you go to. That this thing is so much of a meant to be lived out there than just protected in here type thing. This is a moment where this building and all of the success is happening, that as God is building, as God is leading, now the enemy is trying to destroy their mindset. But when you're doing God's work, opposition is going to be inevitable. There's going to be a fight. I can tell you personally of an individual years ago that they were in marriage, and I watched God show up supernatural and restore their marriage. It was such a beautiful thing. And this guy was taller than the rest. He had a voice. I mean, the dude could sing like crazy. He could probably go on some singing competition and do very well, and he knew it. He was very confident in his natural abilities. Coming to church, and God's transforming their family, and everything's going well, and God puts them back together. And here's what's crazy, is in the rebuilding, there become this complacency, and they become kind of spotty at best in attendance to church. And so I set up a lunch with him because I felt like there was something going on. And so I set up a lunch, and I go out. I said, hey, man, how's it going? We got a small talk, and I said, man, how's it? He said, man, I'm going to be honest with you, PJ, because that's what he called me, PJ. It was kind of his initials of Pastor John. He said, be honest with you, PJ. Man, they're going a lot better than when we were faithful at church. I mean, we don't fight near as much. And I'm like, well, yeah. That's because, she was getting the kids ready, and you wasn't helping. I didn't say that because he's telling me this. Kind of like sometimes like Sunday morning can be. You get up trying to get the kids ready. The night before you said you're going to 9:30, but here it is, 11 o'clock. You had your hopes set on the 9:30, and then the things kind of change that morning, and you're ready, but everybody else is not, and you realize you're going to be at the 11, and so there kind of becomes this tension, and you walk up in church like, it's so good to be here, but you've really been kind of a little at each other. There's those moments where there's this in his life, saying, you know what, it's sunny and 70, and everything's comfortable, and everything feels good. We're making money. We're not fighting. Our kids aren't hurting. It's good. I mean, we're not finding, we don't have near the opposition now that we're not faithful. Well, what do you say to that? Probably like much. Well, again, I could have stood up on the table right there where we was eating lunch and said, well, let me tell you why you're feeling, I could have done all of that. But here's what's crazy. As I fast forward 3 weeks, and he's busted in a full-blown affair. Family ripped back apart. And I was like, oh, I thought that there was no opposite. Because I told him there, I said, even when it seems like there's no fight going on, sometimes the fight happens because you're walking the same direction as the enemy is. That seems tough, doesn't it? But can I tell you that opposition comes when you go a different direction? There was no opposition whenever they were defeated. There was no opposition when he was just a cupbearer for the king. Now the opposition comes because now they're going to gain some independence, and they're going to gain some dependence back on the Lord, and the Lord is going to build them, restore them, and they're going to have a confidence that no man can manipulate. This is intimidating to the enemy, especially the one in Samaria. As you read further in the New Testament, they become an outcast. The Lord remembers the way that his people were treated during this season, and they wanted them to stay defeated. As I'm walking through this season with this individual, and I think, man, what? I've walked through seasons where people wouldn't eat because they were so burdened for their marriage and burdened for their opportunity. But whenever good things begin to happen, they became complacent. And the same junk that got them in the position they were in now is what happens, because instead of depending and being desperate as they were towards what God can do, they become comfortable with just a little bit of blessing, and then it distracts them from the opportunity of the more that God had. Just kind of start rolling, riding smooth. Go, man, everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be, we don't face near the opposition. I mean, we're not as desperate and hungry for God to do. Can I tell you that the enemy is seeking whom he may devour? Is the enemy seeking whom he may devour as someone that he's already eaten? No. When you are living in a direction opposite, you become prey for the predator, but you cannot be prey that is eaten by the predator whenever you have the victorious king who is protecting you. The spiritual enemy is seeking. Can I tell you that you need to remember this? You need to write this down, that when you're walking a different direction, you will feel the opposition of the enemy. But when you're going the same way, you won't feel it. It's amazing how in our humanity we can become blinded to the dysfunction that the enemy is working, because it doesn't hurt the same as when we resist our flesh. I know that this is life. This is real life. This is where a lot of us live. But it's not where God desires for us to live. The enemy's rocking us to sleep in complacency whenever he's saying, I want you to step in. You got to keep building. You got to keep putting the brick upon brick, the precept upon precept, line upon line, because I've got some great stuff for you. Don't become happy with a half-built wall. I got more. I got more for you. And guess what? Yeah, they're going to talk trash about you, because that's what the enemy does. They distract you. See, we don't face opposition when we're doing something wrong. We face it because we're doing something right. The times that my kids have done something wrong, if I jump on board with them and continue the dysfunction, they don't resist. They're like, yeah, that's funny. But when I challenge their ideology, their philosophy of what they're doing, when I challenge the cycle of what they're doing, kids say the stupidest things sometimes, like, I hate you. I'm like, you'll never eat again. You keep talking like that. I pay for your food. I got a friend. They'll get tired of you. I'll move out. Not quick enough. Like, that's me. No, it's just stupidity, and I don't respond. I'm not going to respond to stupidity in that, because I know that that's just stupid emotion that is talking. I face opposition with my kids sometimes, not because when they're doing something wrong, I'm trying to get them to turn a different direction, and there's going to be opposition. What does opposition look like? I'm glad you asked me. It's a great question. Opposition is when the enemy will attempt to discourage us first from the outside elements. So that's what happens. Sanballat and Tobiah are talking their trash from the outside. Did the people hear it? I'm sure they did. Did it reach back to them? I'm sure it did. And what was it? It was criticism. And criticism is the cheap seats where opinions are given, but there's no skin in the game. Well, you know what they need to be doing. They're not going to make it. They're not strong enough. But they haven't lifted their finger to rebuild anything. It's kind of like when I was at a football game in Shreveport. Now, for all my Auburn and Mississippi State and LSU fans, any of the other fans in here, I apologize, but this is just an example that was real easy for me when I was thinking about this. Is because Alabama had 2 years where they were in the Independence Bowl back-to-back, and I lived there, I got to go to both for free. Because let's just be honest, it's not the biggest bowl ever. That's not like a slap against you. I'm just saying it was just some bad years, It was Shula's last year, which he wasn't even there. And then it was Saban's first year because he couldn't get past ULM. They stopped him on I-20 along the way to a good bowl, and he ended up at that one. And I remember sitting there listening to the fans say, "You got to go, he's wide open." And I'm like, oh, you who may have played junior high football know better how to coach a team than these guys who make $1 bazillion in their lifetime doing it. You ever notice you never seen a fan fired for not winning the game? Not one time. I have not seen the athletic director walk up to the stands and be like, "Jimmy Joe, man, you're fired. We're never going to run that play that you screamed from the 50-yard line, 17 rows up again ever. Get out of here. You're done." They didn't do that. They fire the coach. Why? Because there is a process that is happening, and from the outside, these people are running. Why? Because they haven't put in 1 hour of practice. They haven't put in 1 minute. They haven't been at the meetings. They don't know the scheme they don't know the why behind the what is happening, and so they're just become a critic. Say, "You know what? It's going to be years before we're ever good." It's amazing how all of a sudden when things become good, is now them same people who said everybody that Saban was so stupid that year think that he's the next Bear Bryant. Which we know what that is in Alabama. That, someone's an atheist and somebody doesn't believe in Bear Bryant. It's kind of that. Now everybody thinks the second coming, and it's like, but the fans, fans can be swayed very easily. And the Lord's not desiring for us to be a fan. He's desiring for us to be committed to the process. And critics from the outside are always going to run their mouth, so we shouldn't be surprised when people begin to run their mouth and say, "Man, I can't believe they're doing that. That's stupid. Man, you talking about they going to be married again, everything going, yeah, right. You seen it? Look, everybody's always going to have an opinion when they're not committed to the process. So instead of being surprised about it, we should expect it because we're going in opposite direction of stupid. And there will be times that people say the stupidest things. A fox could tear that down. Who cares about a fox? I would have picked something a little bigger. They say the stupidest thing because stupid doesn't have a filter. They just vomit it right out and say the dumbest things. And the craziest thing is some of the stupid things they say become believable. But we expect at some level, I think all of us are used to people from the outside that aren't for us, that are our natural enemies. We kind of expect for them to run their mouth. But the one that will hurt the most when you're doing what God's called you to do is when you get discouragement from the inside. Verse 10 of chapter 4 says, "Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, 'The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall.'" So let's just back up a couple of chapters, and now they're like, "We're going to rebuild the wall." They're all excited about it. Everybody's excited about work till they go to work. "Oh, you mean I got to work to get paid?" Yeah, nobody's just giving away paychecks for nothing. Everybody's excited about the dream until there becomes a plan that has to be worked out. Everybody loves big picture. They just don't love picking up a brush and painting. "Oh, that's a beautiful picture." Yeah, you would have loved it a lot more had you picked up a brush and helped. And the same critics that trash what you were doing will be the same people that become fans when it looks good. You expect it from the outside. But when it's from the inside, it hurts. Why? What happened? What happened? Like, I heard enough negativity whenever I stepped through some of the biggest opportunities that God's ever given me as someone called to preach. I can remember, the excitement and people say, "No, SC's never going to work." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's your mom." Or whatever I say to them, And I'm excited because I know God's going to prove. But the things that have hurt me the most have never been the outside criticism. It's always been from within. Because it doesn't make sense to me. Because when you're on the same team, you should be fighting together, not against each other. But what happens is we start to take our eyes off of God's ability and our insecurities take over. I can remember the very beginning. I can remember one person, and you probably heard me mention it before. I can remember a person coming up in just a low day and just saying, God wanted me to tell you, get ready, everybody's leaving. Amen. Oh, what are you supposed to say? That's a good word. Man, that's so powerful. Let me go preach second service now. A couple weeks go by. Some lady grabs me right here in the front row. I just want to tell you, just get ready, guys. Everybody's about to leave. I'm like, that's twice. Don't feel good the second time either. But I'm not like, I rebuke you, shut your mouth and go out there and kiss that pokey tree right out there. Let it stab you up in your face, and I hope a disease and a curse of 1,000 fleas of a camel's life will come. I don't even say anything like that. I'm not even thinking. It's just after the fact. Like, I should have said something better. But I'm like, oh, thank you. Why did I say thank you? It was weird. I should say, I don't receive that. But I was just like, oh, okay, like that was awkward. Okay, well, let me preach second service. And so then you fast forward and they come back, have a great month. They come in, oh, Pastor, I just want to tell you, God told me the roof's about to blow off. People are going to be coming. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So you was a critic when it looked bad. Now you're a fan that it looks good. Now you've lost your ability to be a voice into anything that's happening because you're emotionally led, not spiritually driven. I didn't say that. It's just what I thought. I said, oh, thank you, whatever. Because there will be people that talk that aren't going to have skin in the game. But whenever people have skin in the game, these are the individuals that followed Nehemiah that are rebuilding the wall. They lost the ability to see what God was doing, their insecurities. They just started to listen to that voice that says, who do you think you are? You're just one person. You're not going to make a big difference. I mean, people know your story. They know your past. They know the things that you've done wrong. You're never going to be able to rebuild. You're never going to be able to do what God's called you to do because you're not good enough. And doesn't it seem like we could talk about this every week because that voice is very consistent in our lives to try and distract us from a destiny that God has called us to? That the outside criticism now becomes a lie that becomes truth that is believed because now they're like, man, it's too big. We're not able to do it. There's too much trash. We're never going to be able to rebuild this wall because it becomes difficult. The voice is steadily screaming. These problems are too big. Your past is going to resurface. They're going to know what you did. Everybody's never going to see you for who you are now. They're going to always remember who you were then. But there comes this moment where this discouragement becomes defeated. And Nehemiah stands up. In verse 14, it says, after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight your brothers, your sons, and your daughters, your wives, your homes. He said, fight for them. Basically, he's standing up and saying to each one of them that are doubting, saying, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. He's saying to them, in reference of what Paul said, is what can separate us from the love of God? Height or depth? Is there anything that can separate us? Is this obstacle going to separate us from the ability that God can give us to overcome? No, it can't. And we've got to be reminded that discouragement is a natural process when we're walking in what God has for us to do, that people are going to say things from outside and from within, but we overcome it remembering what God has done. I want you to write it down. The way that we defeat it, the way that we overcome it, is we remember that God is greater than our enemy. And here's what he said, and I want to just read real quickly. He says, from that day on, in verse 16, he said, from that day on, half of my men did the work while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. Why? Because that critic became physical, became violent, began to attack them, to distract them from what they were doing. It says, then the officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. And those who carried materials, I want you to underline this if you can, or highlight it in lecture. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. They built a wall like this, and they held a weapon on the other. They were going to stay working while the enemy comes. They're going to fight the enemy off and keep working. They were driven to complete what God had called them to do. Verse 21, let's jump to there. It says, well, in verse 19, he says to them, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. And wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. He's saying we're outnumbered. We don't have enough equipment. But I tell you what, when you hear the trumpet, because we're spread out over this wall, wherever you hear the trumpet, you rally to that trumpet sound, and we're going to watch God win the victory for us. Yeah, we're going to have a sword. We're going to have a weapon in our hand, and we're going to engage the enemy, but we're going to win, and we're going to watch God win for us as he uses us to do it. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful story in Nehemiah. And it says that they continued to work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn until the stars came out. And at that time I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night so they can serve us as guards by night and workmen by day. And verse 23 is important. Neither I nor my brothers nor my men nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had a weapon, and each went, even when he went for water. What was he saying? Is there was no off time in the rebuilding process of the walls of the city. Listen to me. We don't get off days in spirituality. And what God's doing, we don't clock out and be like, I'm not going to be spiritual today. Does that seem tough? No, I don't think it's tough. I think it's life-giving. To be able to be challenged. And then in vulnerability, I'm going to share with you just a moment that happened. I became, in one season of my life, extremely devoted to something and a burden that I had, and God was blessing it. And when I came home, I'd given so much and done so much, and when I came home, I was kind of checked out a little bit. And I wasn't cussing my kids or beating them or telling my wife she was, I wasn't being ugly to April. It was just, it was wore out. And I was trying to recover somewhere, and it became this moment where April says, baby, because that's what she calls me. She said, baby, you're one of the hardest working men that I know. But you become lazy at home. Now, how many of you know that's kind of tough to hear sometimes? See, there's a difference between a critic and someone who has skin in the game that wants the best for you. It revolutionized something for me. It let me know that we don't hit the clock ever. Because in the rebuilding of the walls, I'm teaching other people how to fight, other people how to win. I can't overlook the opportunity I have at home. It's kind of like the electrician who fixes everybody else's lights, but his porch light won't turn on. It's not because he doesn't know how. It's because he spends so much time and energy doing everybody else's lights. Sometimes his doesn't work because he doesn't have the energy left to do it. And that's what it became, is kind of this, man, when he says we don't take off our clothes, it meant that there wasn't this off moment to say, all right, now I'm just going to lose responsibility. Why? Because this life is temporary, and we are to spend every moment rebuilding what the enemy has tore down so that we can help people that aren't strong enough to fight themselves so that they have a shot. Because what God has done in us is he wants to do in someone else. And we don't undress from the moment and pretend that we're not engaged in the battle anymore. We're always fighting. Why? Because that's what this life is. It is a fight against the opposition, the distraction and the discouragement and the obstacles that come. They will happen. Obstacles will happen. There will always be obstacles. It's an obstacle for me when April said that to me, but it became a moment where I said, I'm either going to stop here and get offended at what she said, or I'm going to say, I need you to help me. When you see me checked out, please remind me. But don't do it this way. I'm like, see, you're checked out again. You're in. Don't do that. Because I won't always respond the right way. I won't always respond when you're like, I guess that golf game you had. No, don't be doing all that. Just say, man, I just need you to re-engage. Like, oh, yeah, I'm going to try. Okay, I guess this. All right, re-engage. Isn't it crazy? Because, you got to remember, if you've ever listened to my testimony, I prayed for God to let me be a father. And now that I am one, I'm missing the greatest opportunities because I'm checking out on the most important job he's ever given me. Because I'm burying myself in what became easy. And I was helping other people win. I can't forget my responsibility at home. So now, when I'm done with church work, and I'm never done, you never clock out, I don't go home like, oh, I'm just going to chill and relax. Everything's going to be good. Like, I believe there are people in the sound of my voice. You've grown up in the church world for years. You possibly have family and ministry. You know what's like? Just so go and go. And it becomes a burden that is life-sucking instead of life-giving. So I want to share with my kid. I want to share with my family what God's doing, how great it is. So they'll never hear the distraction from the outside like, preacher's kids. Like, yeah, that's right, they're preacher's kids. But I'm going to teach them how to love Jesus, not just keep some rules so they don't embarrass me. Why? Because I'm not clocking out. Just like you don't want to clock out. I wasn't intentionally doing it, but it was happening. There was an obstacle. Look, we all understand obstacles. We say, man, I want to get out of debt. Doesn't it seem like when you want to get out of debt, something always breaks down? I'm going to pay this debt off, and then your motor blows up in your car. And you don't have anybody you know has got enough money to help you get it done, and you just got to figure it out. And so you go and do stupid with zeros on the end of it. But you keep on fighting to get out of debt. So I said, man, I'm going to lead my family spiritually. I'm going to lead my family, and you start trying, and your teenager looks at you and be like, I don't really believe that. But why? I slap you into submission. You going to believe. Yeah, you can. It doesn't change anything. Look, can I tell you that I just believe in authenticity. I believe that we exist to lead people in an authentic relationship with Jesus Christ. And you would think that as we do family devotion that my kids are sitting down going, Father, drop that anointed word right now. Yes. It's always a headache. Come here. Hey, guys, come here. We're going to have, how long is it going to last? I'll tell you how long it's going to last until you get the Lord and get that devil of rejection out your life. That's how long it's going to last. Care about Fortnite. Think you're going to be a professional gamer. You think the percentage of people who play pro sports, and think how many people think they're going to be a professional gamer. It's even lower. Oh, man, y'all don't probably deal with that. I'm just kind of being open. I'm telling them like, hey, they're not sitting, but it's the discipline of doing it. It's always going to be challenged. Like, oh, it didn't. I can remember our season of life with my daughter's in first service, and she left shortly after first service. She attended first service and worked and listened and served, and she's going to play travel basketball now, but she always was a priority for us to be in the house, and she's gone now and going off to do that. And I got a 15-year-old that just through persistence finally made the JV basketball. It's just really a cool story. And I got a 12-year-old that's in a season where he's just loving life and little friends and going, and we're just crazy busy between games and practices and church functions. But I'm not like complaining. I'm happy about it because I know it's a season that we won't always have. I'm stupid happy about it. I really am. So for us to have a family meal consistently through the week, sometimes it's challenging because we don't get home from the ballpark till late, and we've got stuff going on up till. So we try to take advantage of the moments. I can remember sitting down having a family meal, and we're gonna pray over the family meal because it's a rare. So we sit down and it's family time, and I say, Gavin, I want you to pray. Gavin, pray and bless the food. He's like, no, I don't want to. You're like, you're telling me a pastor's, he didn't call down, pray in the Spirit. He didn't. Are you kidding me? No, he was just he's like, I don't want. And I was like, what? And Gage pipes up. He said, kick his butt, Daddy, kick his butt. Don't be offended. That word has 2 crosses in it. It's one of those. So here's what happens. He says, so that happens. It happens in everybody's family. Not everybody's like, oh man, let's get deeper in this word. They're teenagers. They have these moments. I listen to these incredible experiences they have, but it's the consistency of doing it. Can I tell you that whenever you have these obstacles and you want to try to lead your family, don't expect them to come in and be like, oh, yes, please, let's have every night together, because they've grown in the distractions and the criticisms and the obstacles of the enemy, that you got to fight for this. In fact, I'm going to turn my business more towards the Lord. Don't be surprised when half the employees leave. Here's what he's telling them. Here's what he says in verse 14 of these obstacles. He said, guys, remember the Lord. He said, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. He's basically saying, do you remember when your ancestors were trapped up against the Red Sea and God split the Red Sea and they walked across on dry ground? That when they were thirsty, he brought water from a rock. When they were hungry, he brought manna from heaven. That he provided a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. That if God is able to do for them, then what would make us think he can't help us rebuild this wall? Can I tell you what the importance of that is? Is that in remembering the Lord, you never forget what he's done, so it builds the faith of what he can do. It's your story. It's your testimony. Through this season of life and ministry, watching people walk through the loss of family members, when tragedy happens or something strikes and the family member gets sick with cancer, can I tell you that cancer doesn't win the battle, because death is swallowed up in the victory that Jesus Christ has given, and heaven is no cheap reward for those that love Him and live according to His purpose. When we die here, there is no loss. It's only a win when you love Jesus. Like, I know it sounds like it doesn't sound that fun, but I'm telling you, when your hope is secure in Christ, there is no loss. It's temporary, it's fleeting, but the eternal things are what matters. And this obstacle that we overcome is we remember what God has done, and it builds for faith for what He can do. We remember the Lord. If God's ever done anything for you, if He's ever rebuilt, if He's ever showed up in a situation, if He's ever provided, don't let your current situation block you from an opportunity to become who God's called you to be. Because if you'll look back and remember what He did, and this is the trick of the enemy. The trick of the enemy will make you think the past was better than your current situation. But the truth of it is, when I look back 15 years, that the miracles that God worked, there was just as much opposition and obstacles then as there are that I face now. But the enemy wants us to think that the past was always better, because he wants you to live in a yesterday you'll never get back, to keep you distracted from a season and a moment right now when you're supposed to put your hands to the wall. See, that's why God's people struggle with disloyalty. That's why they can't be faithful. That's why they can't, because they're listening to the wrong voices, and the obstacles are winning, and they feel like they can't climb. But here's what you can do. If you remember the Lord, you say, you know what? This is what I see. This is my burden. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to pick up a weapon. I'm going to pick up something to build with, and I'm going to build, and I'm going to fight the enemy off as I build what God has called me to build. And that's stability. Consistency. You remember the Lord. You never forget what He's done, so you can not lose sight of what He can do now. There's no situation that I face. Why? Because God's done too much for me to lose hope now. And we don't have time. It's 12:05. I don't have time to tell you about the times people stop me. All the times that people have stopped me. The times people bless me. I don't come from a family with money. My family was as broke as the 10 Commandments. They did all kinds of stupid with zeros on the end and lost everything. And whenever life got tough for me financially, I didn't have anybody to call. And God showed up because He spoke to people that I didn't even know and stopped me in parking lots and handed me a check and said, "What's your name?" And I'm like, that's weird. So I told him my name. I said, Johnny Hunt, because that's my name. He said, I just need to know who to write this check to. God spoke to me, told me to write you. I'm like, no, I can't. But when God tells them to do it, you can't refuse it. You can. Don't be praying for blessing, and when blessing comes, don't be praying for a miracle. When the miracle steps up, don't refuse the miracle. But I didn't go, man, that's it. I'll just quit trying. I'll just sit around and walk through parking lots. That's what I'll do. No. Stay faithful to building. God's saying, I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. If I created something out of nothing, put it in the middle of somewhere and made it stay, I can meet your needs. Keep working on what I've told you to work for. I will build it. I will provide for you. So if things become financially tough, what I do, I said, Pastor, I go, man, I better call my friend's got a ball. I better call this person. I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to call my dad. My daddy's been dead for almost 5 years now. I can't call him, and when he was alive, he couldn't help me anyway. I got one Father who's in heaven, who owns everything, who've never seen the righteous forsaken or a seed begging bread. I've seen God do too much to lose hope now. But if I forget when He showed up in the past, I'll forget what He's able to do in this moment. Man, what if you lose somebody? What if? For everything that we engage and we encounter in life, for every discouragement, for every obstacle, for every distraction, God is always the answer. Remember the Lord. Secondly, fight for your cause. We said fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. So, Pastor, isn't it all about the love? Yeah, love fights for what's worth fighting for. Christianity is a battleground, not a playground, y'all. You got a weapon in one hand, you do the work with the other. You fight the good fight of the faith. Our burdens will prepare. The way that we build, the way that we fight now, the way that we build now will prepare the way for generations behind us until the Lord comes, to be able to have an opportunity to receive protection, to receive covering, and carry out legacy, because we engage the obstacles and the opposition that we have. Because the obstacles and oppositions that they face may be different from what we feel, but they're obstacles nonetheless. And because we won this battle, it'll teach them to win that battle. We have to be faithful to the cause. Stand with me today. As we get ready to close, I just want to remind you, I know that this has a tendency to be a little more heavy, but I think it's heavy in the right way. I think it's heavy because we live this life and it's difficult at times, but man, I think we miss it so much in the American church, because we tell everybody, man, when you come to Jesus, you'll never have another bad day. No, the enemy will bring bad days, and there'll be bad days that you have, but those bad days only last for a moment, because joy comes in the morning. You fight for the cause. Our burdens prepare the way. Can I tell you today that opposition is not always a bad thing? It can be because you're doing something right. And that opposition, that discouragement, that discrediting from the outside and the in will often be used to unite us together to do something great. Now we get to wrap up and finishing strong next week. But this was a pivotal moment for Nehemiah and his people that joined him in the journey. It was pivotal because they remembered the Lord and they continued to fight for the cause. We're several weeks in. Some of you have shared with me the burdens, the calls that you feel like God has placed on your life. And as you step into it, you're going to face opposition. That's okay. It means you're doing something right. Opposition excites me because it means I'm going in a different direction from the enemy. And I don't get mad at the individuals, because I just know that there's something broken in them. They're not against me. They're just for themselves. That's life. So what do? We keep the main thing the main thing. We get a weapon to fight the enemy in this hand, and we pick up a hammer in the other, and we build something that has purpose. Will change us. Opposition can be a great thing, and it will unite us. We make a difference. Come on, I want you to pray with me today. Every head bowed, every eye closed. Father, in the name of Jesus, there's an opportunity for us today. This isn't about styles. This isn't about a method. This is about the Holy Spirit having an opportunity to speak to each one of us. Every man, every woman, every child under the sound of my voice. Or today, may you speak to them. May you speak to them, because the obstacles that they face, they haven't even shared with everybody else. The insecurities that they feel, the inabilities that they have, or maybe they feel like their past carries such a dark moment that nobody will ever believe in them again. But today is a day where we remember the Lord. We remember the Lord. And for some today, that means a complete and total surrender to you, Jesus. So Holy Spirit, I ask you to draw people to yourself, to the Lord today. If that's you, today's your day to come to Christ. Complete surrender. All you do is just lift your hands and surrender and say, Lord, today